Welcome to Brain Health Matters, a show dedicated to helping you improve your health, master your mind, and boost your brain. I'm your host, Kate Kunkel, and this week we're going to learn why it's so important to dump the sugar. And our guest will be giving us great tips and tools to do it relatively painlessly. Stay tuned.
Brain Health Matters is brought to you by Don't Let the Memories Fade. Learn many enjoyable ways to enhance body, mind, and spirit with simple lifestyle changes that will help you improve your memory and your mind. You can create a healthier, more vibrant future with Don't Let the Memories Fade. Available in ebook and paperback on Amazon everywhere.
Hi, I'm Kate Kunkel, and today Becky Bell is here. She's a registered dietitian specializing in gut health and metabolism. She's the co-owner of Rooted Nutrition Therapies, a functional nutrition practice dedicated to helping women eliminate digestive symptoms and fuel their metabolism so they can give up dieting for good. Welcome, Becky.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, so a big part of people having trouble with their waistline is how much sugar they ingest, correct?
Absolutely. It's a big contributor.
As is the contribution of sugar to brain health matters. Memory loss as people get older, and if they're heavier, they also have a much bigger risk of developing dementia and other cognitive issues and neurodegenerative issues as they age. So I'm delighted to have Becky here with me. What I am going to do, folks, is just introduce a little bit of the science behind the importance of getting rid of sugar for your brain health, so that when you get these, you will get why you really need to pay attention to what this lady has to say. We have to dump the sugar. Bottom line, we just have to. It's not just about losing weight, although that's a big and important part, and we'll talk about that, but our brains simply don't do well with sugar. Hippocrates, who's the father of modern medicine, said, "Look to the gut. It's the cause of all disease," and it really is. And Becky's got lots to say about that. And the gut-brain connection is real, and it's very important. In fact, 80% of your nervous system lies in your gut. So now we normally have a barricade between our gut and our blood. But when we eat food that causes inflammation or an imbalance in the acid in the gut, the tight junctions that form that barricade are broken. So it's like little tiny spaces between that, then the objects in the gut, the stuff that's in the gut, can get out of the gut and into the bloodstream. That can be yeast, mold, fungus, toxins, undigested proteins, and things like that. Once they get into the blood, they can end up throughout your entire body, including your brain. And that's when we get inflammation in the brain. So sugar equals acid. It's an acidic substance, and that can cause inflammation. So that's the first reason we want to dump the sugar. But there's more. By eating too much sugar, or there's a coach that calls them crappy carbs, which is completely refined and processed carbs. When they come into the body and there's too much protein or unhealthy fats, that excess sugar pairs up with the protein or the fat, and it causes something called glycation. The product of that glycation is something called advanced glycation end products. Think of it like an egg that gets boiled. Once it's boiled, it's there. You can't unboil it. And it's the same with ages. They cause plaques, and when they get into your bloodstream, they harden the collagen in your bloodstream, and that can lead to hypertension, which can lead to heart attacks and strokes. And those are risk factors for dementia. So I wanted to kind of set that up and let Becky take it from here, because there's just so much to unpack with the dangers of sugar. So Becky, how can you tell though if you're having a problem with sugar?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I think that just craving sugar all the time, is a good indicator that there is a problem with sugar, because the more that we consume sugar, the more that we tend to want it. It fuels those cravings. I also think if you just notice that you struggle with food cravings in general, not even just sugar, but if you feel like you're struggling with food cravings, that could be an indicator that sugar is really a problem for you, because there's a big connection just between appetite and sugar. Or if you feel like you feel hangry often during the day, like you feel like you can't get from, one meal to the next without like really just needing, like, you feel like you need snacks, or you feel like you get really irritable, moody between meals. I think that's another good indicator that, we need to look at how your body is handling food, but also specifically that can mean that you're just your body's hooked on the sugar or those refined carbohydrates.
We used to talk about hypoglycemia, saying that if you were hypoglycemic, then you would get moody. And when I was younger, if I did not eat, I would get really moody. So
Mhm.
I know that that can happen. Is that something that you would talk about, or is that something completely different?
Yeah, I mean, I think hypoglycemia is a part of it. Now, like technically, when we talk about hypoglycemia, like the technical medical term would be blood sugar, that's really below what's considered the normal range. I think what a lot of us experience is, that we might have blood sugars that are technically normal, that are like within that normal range, but we're having wide swings up and down. And even if it's not technically like a dangerously low blood sugar level, hypoglycemia, it's still a dip. And sometimes those dips in blood sugar levels can fuel some of those symptoms, can fuel the moodiness, the irritability, feeling hangry, and feeling like you just got to eat, either when that's usually when we feel like we really need to grab for those quick carbs, or we feel like we need sugar, because your body knows that's quick energy. You're going to get that hit of quick energy if you fuel with sugar. So when you get that dip in blood sugar, that's your body's natural response, is to say, like, I need to fix this problem with some quick energy.
So so now you satisfy this craving for sugar, which is going to make that spiral and continue, but that affects insulin, right?
Mhm.
Now, is insulin, what is its purpose? Like, from what I understand, it's a nutrient transport hormone. It's not something that's supposed to it's not actually designed to lower your blood sugar. So how does that fit into all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, insulin does lower your blood sugar, but you're exactly right. Really, its main purpose is transport. It's moving, glucose or sugar, in your bloodstream into the cells where it can get used for energy. That's like insulin's like the key that, unlocks the sugar moving into the cells. What happens is that when we consume not just sugar, but any form of carbohydrates, then it stimulates our body to produce insulin so that our body can manage that, the food that's coming in, the energy, and get it into the cells. That's a normal process, but foods like sugar or highly refined carbohydrates, they tend to get digested very quickly. They enter the bloodstream and they turn into glucose, into sugar very quickly, and you get kind of a spike, in blood sugar. So instead of a slow rise in sugar in the blood, we get kind of a rapid, spike that creates your body responds by producing kind of a surge of insulin to help to manage all of that. Um, but not only does that move that into the cells, sometimes when that whole process happens very quickly, then we get rebound, so you get that quick rise of blood sugar, and then your body has to react so severely to try to manage that. Then you get that reactive hypoglycemia. You kind of then get, the rebound of getting onto the lower end of blood sugar. So it's a vicious cycle.
Sure. And so insulin resistance, then, how does that come into play?
It means that your body, your cells are not as responsive to insulin anymore. And so your body has to produce more and more and more insulin to try to manage all of that, all of the carbohydrates and the sugar. And for sure that, insulin resistance can play a role in our cravings, but in metabolism, our storage of fat, we tend to see more fat storage because insulin is also a form of a fat storage hormone. So we're pumping out high levels of insulin all the time. And I'm sure you can speak to the other effects that has in your body and your brain. But we definitely see weight gain when you're having those high levels of insulin all the time.
Insulin. And then that affects that. I mean, that is an absolute risk factor for developing any kind of cognitive decline. They did a study back a couple of years ago, and it came up in the Journal of Alzheimer's. They studied 1,000 seniors, and those with the highest intake of sugars and processed foods. So not just like pure sugar, but also processed foods, because they have so much sugar, right?
Mhm.
They were 89% more likely to have cognitive decline. So it's not just like the weight gain was part of it, but also the more sugar they ate, the higher their likelihood of developing dementia. That's pretty scary.
That's pretty scary. Yeah. I've heard that. I know you're probably aware of this. Some people call Alzheimer's like diabetes type 3. It's so closely connected to that regulation of insulin and sugar in the body.
Yeah, so now we get to how you can help us avoid those problems. So you are the expert because a lot of people come to me, they ask for guidance, in their diet, and I tell them, you got to dump the sugar, but you have to talk to somebody who's really good at helping you do that because that's not always easy, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, sugar is highly pleasurable. It's, we know that it gives us those big hits of dopamine, which is it's like our pleasure neurotransmitter. And yeah, once you're on that roller coaster that like we just talked about, that blood sugar roller coaster, it can be really hard to get off of it. I think some of my best tips for, getting rid of sugar out of the diet and where I always start people with is first of all, making sure you're eating enough, because if you are really under eating, like a lot of times people try to, maybe they're focused on weight loss or they're, really restricting calories and eating a very low calorie diet and then also trying to get rid of sugar. And I usually recommend like, let's deal with sugar problem first, because if you are really under eating and then also trying to eliminate sugar, your biology is going to take over and say like, I need to get energy from somewhere, and your cravings are going to be much worse.
Right.
I also think it's important though, just to focus on with your diet, to focus on eating in such a way that balances your blood sugar and tries to minimize those dips and spikes that we talked about. And some of the ways you can do that is to eat consistently throughout the day. Try to avoid eating like erratically or skipping meals. Trying to eat consistent meals throughout the day, and really focus on making sure you're getting protein, fat, and fiber at every single meal.
Yeah, so many people do not get enough fiber. What do you think about fruit? Because fruit, people say, well, it's not good for you because of all the sugar. But on the other hand, fruit often, has good fiber, especially like apples and that sort of thing. How do you address that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I really am a fan of keeping fruit in the diet. I think it's not nearly the same as, I mean, yes, you can overdo it with fruit, but it's not the same thing as eating a candy bar or drinking a soda, because it's that the fruit in its whole form is got fiber, which slows down that digestion, and most fruits you're not going to get that really that spike in blood sugar like you would if you're drinking a soda. I don't recommend people drink fruit juice, because then you've got like a concentrated amount of, sugar from fruit, and you're missing out on the fiber that slows down the digestion. But whole fruit, I think, is still good to keep in the diet. But I always recommend, especially if you're trying to get off of sugar, is to don't eat fruit by itself, because even though it's got fiber, it still is, pretty much like just carbohydrate. If you are going to eat fruit, eat it with a meal, or if it's a snack, then pair it with maybe a little bit of protein or a little bit of fat. So, like a piece
So
of
like a
fruit.
banana with peanut butter.
Perfect. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or a handful of nuts. And, if you're doing just a piece of fruit, yes, those are great strategies to slow down the digestion and to kind of blunt that spike of sugar, even if it's coming from fruit.
So what are some of the sneaky sources of sugar in foods?
I think one of the biggest ones that I see are condiments. Some of our sauces and condiments, things that we add to food, which we don't always think about. We don't always look at the nutrition labels on those, like things like ketchup, barbecue sauce. Those are big offenders. They're really pretty high in sugar, as well as things like flavored yogurts, some like granola bars, even some protein bars, which we think are maybe supposed to be more like health foods, that often have a lot of added sugars in them. And breakfast cereals are a pretty big offender. Even the best ones usually have quite a bit of sugar. And granola is actually really high in sugar when you buy it in the grocery
Grocery store.
store. And that one is one we think, is probably like a healthier one, but usually pretty high in sugar.
So when we say sugar, one of the things that I've noticed, I live in Ecuador, and here they're crazy for sodas, for soft drinks. Oh my gosh, like instead of drinking water with a meal, they always have soda. But there's sugar in the soda here. In North America, it has high fructose corn syrup. Can you talk to our listeners about the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both sugar.
Yeah.
I think that I would say we should avoid both. I do think though that there are some studies that show that the way our bodies handle that highly refined sugar, so corn syrup, is highly refined form of sugar. It tends to be a little bit more inflammatory, and it does have a little bit bigger impact on your blood sugar levels compared to regular sugar. I think that I think it's not a big enough difference that we should justify let's get rid of corn syrup and just drink sugar. I think we probably should, it's still sugar. But I do think that between the two, if you're having some sugar in the diet, I think the less processed forms of sugar, even if you're going, having some things like honey or maple syrup, yes, those are still sugar. We need to be aware of those. But I think your body does, especially from an inflammation perspective, I think there are some differences in how our bodies handle those things.
I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people say to me, "Well, what about honey or maple syrup?" And I say, "Well, yeah, they're better, but they're still sugar, and they're still going to cause a certain degree of inflammation, and they're going to affect your insulin levels, right? It's still going to
Yep.
do that very same thing."
Yep.
So then the next thing is, what about all this move to have artificial sweeteners?
Mm. Yeah, I think that there are some problems with artificial sweeteners. I think that one of my biggest concerns with artificial sweeteners is just the fact that if you are trying to get off sugar and you replace all of your sugary foods and beverages with just artificially sweetened things, it's still keeping you kind of hooked on sweet. And sometimes when we're used to having sweet things all the time in our diet, like our brain just is telling us like we need sweet. And I think for at least at the beginning when we're trying to get off of sugar, you kind of got to retrain your brain to have a new appreciation for food and flavors, and to get to the point where you don't feel like you just need sweet all the time. So I think that's a reason maybe to not do artificial sweeteners. There are some other concerns I have with some artificial sweeteners, or some such studies that, I mean, my focus is on gut health
Hmm.
particularly, and there are some studies that show some of the most popular artificial sweeteners disrupt your gut microbiome, the balance of bacteria in the gut, and we know that causes lots of problems, to our health, but really can keep you stuck if you're trying to get off of sugar, because your gut balance can have a big impact on appetite and sugar cravings.
Sugar itself, besides causing inflammation, what else can it do then, sugar and artificial sweeteners, to actually disrupt the balance of the microbiota?
Yeah, so when I talk about, gut balance, I kind of talk about, like the good guys and bad guys in the gut. We have tons of bacteria in the gut. We want them there. You need the bacteria in the gut, but we need a good balance between the beneficial bacteria and the ones that are maybe more opportunistic or can cause negative effects. And there's, both artificial sweeteners and sugar itself can kind of lead to that imbalance, or that overgrowth can feed some of the bad guys, in our gut. And that, interestingly enough, that when sugar feeds that imbalance, and then once you get a lot of imbalance in the gut, it actually just fuels the cravings. Sometimes that contributes to things like yeast overgrowth in the gut too. That was yeast overgrowth in particular is when I see causing crazy sugar cravings for people. Sugar feeds that yeast, and so the yeast keeps wanting more and more and more once it's there and it's overgrown. So it keeps you in a vicious cycle because it's like that overgrowth is what's causing all of your cravings or contributing to the cravings. But I think sometimes just like kind of like cutting ties with it and giving your body a chance to rebalance. And in the long run, you'll find like after a while that the cravings get better. You don't need it anymore once we've addressed.
And you won't also be looking for that dopamine hit all the time. So it's a twofold step down from the sugar. So, what would you say to somebody who's coming to you and they say, "I can't, I'm having candy bars and Diet Coke because Diet Coke counteracts the candy bars, right? I see that in the stores all the time. You know, they have this junk food, but it's got Diet Coke
Uh-huh.
to counteract. What do you say to someone like that who's really struggling with the whole sweet feeling?
Honestly, the best way is to kind of go cold turkey, for a while. I think that we have to kind of just, and you have to recognize the fact that sometimes there's kind of a withdrawal period from sugar if it's you are really hooked on it. But I do think it's if you feel addicted to sugar or you feel like it's very difficult to manage those cravings, you might have to kind of just give yourself like 30 days and say, I'm just going to kind of do like a detox from sugar and let my body to just kind of reset from that. But then I think really focusing on at the same time you do that, focusing on increasing foods in your diet that really increase satisfaction, that really like things like healthy fats, that really kind of also help satiety and make your meals more palatable, can help in that period where you feel like you're just like really missing out, and finding other ways to get a dopamine hit. So that we get dopamine from other things besides food, doing other even like pleasurable activities, other things you enjoy can give you some dopamine, and really leaning into that when you are kind of going through that withdrawal period, I think also can be helpful to give your brain some of that dopamine in another healthy way.
So instead of rewarding yourself with a candy bar, reward yourself with, I don't know, going dancing or going for a nice walk or
Mhm.
something. Intermittent fasting, I recommend that to my clients all the time for brain health because it gives your brain a chance to clean out all the detritus from the day before. How does that help with sugar cravings, or does it?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, I think it depends on someone's history. I think that I am always cautious with intermittent fasting if someone has any kind of like history of disordered eating. It can, I think, increase preoccupation with food. But there are some studies that show fasting has an effect on our hormones that our hunger hormones. So particularly, leptin, which is a hormone that tends to suppress appetite and can again suppress sugar cravings. Periods of fasting can increase that. It can also lower levels of your hormone ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, stimulates hunger. And some studies, show that insulin or that intermittent fasting can improve insulin sensitivity, which, as we talked about already, just helps to manage, helps your body manage to sugar and carbohydrates in a more efficient way.
When I say intermittent fasting, I guess I'm more like time restricted fasting. So, because a lot of people, they literally eat from the time they get up until the time they go to bed.
Hmm.
And there's your body doesn't have a chance to really use what it's got, and it keeps this cycle going. So I recommend starting with just a 10-hour fast. If you can sleep for 8 of those hours and add a couple of extra hours, stop eating, and then move to at least a 12-hour. I'm at 16 hours, and a lot of people, my clients are at 16 hours. And I just find, for me personally, it really helps me not want to have, just anything. I can actually think and enjoy what it is that I'm ingesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for digestion too. When we are feeding our bodies all the time, it's like our gut has to constantly be digesting food. So I think giving yourself, I recommend people, like you said, try to get to that 12 hours at night, at least, between dinner and breakfast. That gives your digestive system also a time to have a break from digestion and kind of and cleanse and reset. I think that is beneficial.
Yeah, I like that word reset. Yeah, because we just keep putting stuff in, and not just food. It can be other things, energy, even stress levels. All of that affects our digestion. How about stress and sugar? What's the relationship there?
I mean, that's huge. Stress and sleep both are both huge factors. Stress affects our cortisol levels in our body. So we have a lot of stress and we produce cortisol. And cortisol can has a huge impact on blood sugar levels too. Your body, when blood sugar is low, actually your body stimulates, cortisol to bring it up. But when you're the stress definitely contributes to just that dysregulation, throughout the day, and absolutely can cause cravings as well as lack of sleep. I think I didn't mention that when I talk about tips for getting rid of sugar, but really starting by focusing on optimizing sleep is essential. And I'm sure most of us we can probably, we know that from our experience, that when we are, overdo it, we stay up late, then you crave more food, right? Or you crave more junk food, you tend to want sugar for that quick energy.
Becky, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. If there was one thing you could say to someone who comes to you and says they're craving it, what is one thing you would say to get them inspired to get rid of the sugar?
Not a single client that I have ever helped get off of sugar regrets it. Almost everyone will look back and say, I cannot believe I felt so bad all the time. I think that the future is bright if you can break that habit. You think that it will affect so much how you feel and your energy, and maybe that's one more than one thing, but just that you won't regret it.
Well, you know what? That's important because people need to feel what it's going to be like at the end of this journey, because it's not going to be an easy journey for people who are really addicted. So having that thing to look forward to, that you're going to feel fantastic and you won't regret it. Becky, how can people work with you?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one nutrition coaching. I do all telehealth, so I see people in multiple states around the U.S. So you can find me on Instagram, rooted.dietitians, so you can follow along with me, or my website is rootednutritiontherapies.com. And you can learn more about our services for helping to optimize gut health and metabolism on either of those places.
Great. I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. Becky, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Brain Health Matters. Be sure to subscribe with your favorite podcast service so that you can get all the latest episodes when they're released.